Begin today the Mishnah at Daf Yudalet Amud Beis, towards the bottom of the Yamud. This Mishnah continues the discussion we had before regarding a woman that had a relation with someone, and we're not sure who that person is. Did she become apostle or not through this? So we had before a machlokes between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua, whether we trust her when she says that this man was a kosher man. Rabbi Gamliel says we trust her, and Rabbi Yeshua says we don't trust her. So the Mishnah brings a story in connection to this. Zok Teilige Mishnah at the bottom of the page. Daf Yud, next page. Yudalet Amud Beis. Amar Rabbi Yosi said, Maise betinoikis sheyarda lamalois mayim in ayin. There was a story with a girl that went out to fill up water from the spring. And Venanza, and over there, a person forced her and had a relationship with her. So the question is, who's this man? She has no idea. And we're trying to figure out, would she still be kosher or not? Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, Im roiv anshi ha'ir masiin lekohona. If most people of the city are kosher, and therefore she could be married still to a kayin, so then arezu to nasi lekohona. So we could rely on the majority and say that she could still get married to a kayin. So you must have a roiv. But if you don't have a roiv, so then we can't marry her off to a kayin.
Is it 9 out of 10 or just a
roiv? It has to be a roiv. Roiv means 51%, whatever the roiv. That's what roiv means, more than 50%. Talk to Gemara. So here the Mishnah is telling us a new rule. But when we have a suffix about the identity of who was boil her, so we have to have roiv. We didn't have this before. So the Gemara asks, Amalei Rav Rav Nachman. So Rav asks Rav Nachman about this. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Dama Kaman. Whose opinion is Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri following? Ik Rabbi Gamliel. Are we following the opinion of Rabbi Gamliel? So if before we said Afilu b'Rav Psula Nami Machsher, Rabbi Gamliel was lenient about this, and Rabbi Gamliel says that we trust her even when it comes to a case where most people there are puzzle. Before we had a few examples for this, whether it was outside the city, where it's mostly psulim, or she was already in Eish Ish. Rabbi Gamliel says that even Rav Psulin, we could be machsher her. And if we follow the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua that was machmer, so afilu b'Rav Kshedim nami puzzle. Rabbi Yeshua said, even in a case where it was mostly kosher to people, nevertheless, we still are machmer and we say she can't get married to a kain. So here, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is a different opinion. He seems to be saying that we don't follow not any of these opinions. Amalei, so Rav Nachman answered and said, Hachi Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. This is what Rav Yehuda Amar Rav said. So according to Rashi, the Gemara is answering here that really Rav Yochanan ben Nuri follows Rabbi Yeshua's opinion that says he's supposed to be stringent about this. And you don't follow a roiv. But over here, Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, what are we speaking about? This happened in the city of Tzipairi, and as Rashi says, the idea of kroinos, the translation of the word kroinos means wagons of people that come into the city of Tzipairi. It's a day of where there's a marketplace that a lot of people are coming into the city. And therefore, as the Gemara is going to explain, because you have over here people of the city, and this is a city that's mostly Yidden, so that's one roiv, the roiv of the city. Besides that, there are many people that are coming into the city, and also from those people that are traveling and coming into the city, roiv of them are Yidden as well. So therefore you have a double roiv. So because there's two roivs over here, even though Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri holds like Rabbi Yeshua that usually we don't rely on roiv, but in this case when there's a double roiv, we do rely on this roiv. As the Gemara now spells out. And as Rabami also explained and said, this story over here that we said that this girl is going to be kosher because of the roiv is because not only the roiv of the city, but there's also a siyah shel bnei adam. There's groups of people that are entering and traveling into the city. And also Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Yanai also said as follows. Rabbi Yanai said, Niv eles bekroinois ksheira lekahuna. So reading simply what Rabbi Yanai said, if she had a relation with someone, bekroines, on these wagons that are coming into the city, she would be kosher to still marry a kain. And the Gemara clarifies what he meant to say. Bekroines lokadaitach? Do you read this literally, that she had a relation with somebody on one of these wagons? Ella rather, what Rav Yari meant to say is, Niv eles b'shas kroines ksheira lekahona. If she had a relation with someone, and we don't know who this is, and it's in this time period when people are traveling into the city, so then you have two roivs. You have the roiv of the people that are in the city, and you have the roiv of the people that are traveling into the city, and therefore she's going to be kosher to kohona. Aval pirish echad mitzipairi, but it's just if it's just the people of Tzipairi. There's no one else that's traveling into the city, and somebody from the city Tzipairi went and was obal and had a relation with her. Then havlat shtuki. the child born would be a shtuki, and usually shtuki means, and over here it means that the child would be pasul. We're not sure who the father is. And the Gemara brings now yet another Ameiraim that said the same thing. Kiha dechi aser avdimi amar ziri amar Rab Chanina, and v'amri la others say amar Rab Ziri amar Rab Chanina without Rav Dimi. That holchen achar roiv ha'ir, we follow the roiv of the people of a city. But ve'ein holchen achar roiv siyah. But we cannot follow the roiv of the people that are traveling. If somebody that was boil, this girl, is coming from the city, so then we can follow that roiv. But if it's a roiv that you know that it's from the people that were traveling, that roiv you can't follow. That's the simple translation of what Rab Chanina said, but the Gemara here right away is going to ask on this, that this has to be reinterpreted. What's the Gemara's question? Klapelai. It should be to the contrary. Klapelai literally means it should go in the opposite direction. Why? So here, the Gemara introduces the concept, and this is going to be much of the Amud here, there's a concept of roiv and kavua. You only follow roiv if the person that is coming from the majority is not in his stationary place where he usually is, like in his home or in a stationary place where he is. That's when you follow roiv. But if he's kavua, if he's in the stationary place where he resides, so then there is no roiv. So then even if the majority is in one way, but he is only from the minority, it doesn't matter. The miyot has the same chshivas as the majority. There's no concept of roiv when there is kavua, as we'll see soon in the Gemara. The Gemara we're going to see soon in the Gemara here. Let's wait. The Gemara is going to tell us. But right now, the Gemara's question is klapelai. That over here, what did Rab Chanina say? If you have the roiv of the city, so then he says you follow roiv. If you have the roiv of people that are traveling, you don't follow roiv. But it should be to the contrary. Why? Hani, naidi, the people that are traveling, they're moving around. They're not stationary in their place. And if so, when you move around and you parish, you're not in your stationary place over there, you do follow roiv. But v'hani kvi, the people of the city could be in their stationary place, in their homes. So why over there would I say that you follow roiv? Kvi v'kaimi, they're in their stationary place. So the Gemara reinterprets what Rab Chanina said, and basically Rab Chanina said the same point that we said before, that we need to have two roivs here. Ella, rather, we follow the roiv of the people in the city, and vuhu the ikke roiv siyabada. Only as long as there's a second roiv, that there's also people that are traveling here, and you have the roiv of those people that are traveling as well that are yidden and that are kosher. So then you follow the double roiv. But you do not follow the roiv if you only have one roiv, the roiv of the people of the city that are kosher, and also or if you have only the roiv of the people that are traveling, that roiv alone you don't follow. You have to have two different roivs. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to explain what's taka de pshat in this inyan. Why do you have to have two roivs? Now, if you think about this logically, there's really no difference statistically or in the numbers when you have two roivs in contrast to one roiv. If you have one roiv, so it's a roiv of the people of the city. Now you also happen to have people that are traveling here, so now you have also the roiv of them, that they're also kosher. That doesn't make it more of a roiv. It doesn't mean that there's more probability because you have two roivs that it should be more of a reason to be machshir. So what's this concept of two roivs? That's what the Gemara is going to explain here. Let's see. Dr. Gemara, my time, what's the reason of here for these two roivs? So the reason is not because when you have two roivs there's more probability. Rather it's a gzeira. Gzeira roiv siya atu roiv ha'ir. There's a gzeira here that if you're going to follow the roiv when you have people that are traveling, so over there that roiv is actually a solid roiv. Why? Because the people that are traveling are not in their stationary place. So over there the roiv applies. But if we're going to follow roiv there, we're afraid that people might come to follow roiv also inside a city. And inside a city, not necessarily is there a roiv, because inside a city, the people, they are stationary in their place. So they were geyser not to follow the roiv siyah because of the roiv ha'ir. Now the Gemara explains further, v'roiv ha'ir nami, even in the city as well, where you would follow the roiv, if the story that happened over here was that the people of the city are out of their homes, and therefore someone went and was boil her, this girl, out of their stationary place. So then, still, Raiv should apply in the city as well, because Kol de Parish, Miru Parish. We apply the klal of Raiv, which is any time the person that came away from his stationary place, he separated, he left his stationary place, and then one of these people went and was boil this girl out of his stationary place, so then we should apply Raiv even in the city as well. But rather, what is the Gzeira really for? Rashi really changes a bit the Gersa here. Rashi takes out the word, I think the words Leitzriche, and instead, reading the Gemara a little bit different. The Gemara is not really saying, usually Leitzriche means that this is a specific case, but the Gemara is just saying that the Gzeira is based on the following concern. That it could be the Ka'azla Ihi Legabayu, that what happened over here is that this girl went to visit somebody in their home, in their stationary place, and then the Havale Kavua, and then if that person was boil her in his stationary place, so over here, even if most of the people of the city were kosher, you can't follow a Raiv. Because the people in the city are over here. What happened is she went to this person in his stationary place at home, and therefore over here there's a kavua. So the point is that there's a gzeira here. That the only reason we need a double raiv is in order that people shouldn't get mixed up with the case of a raiv in a city, where over here you might follow a raiv even in a case where there's a kavua. So when you have to have a double raiv, that will remind you that in a case where there's a double raiv, it's not going to be compared to this case of kavua. So therefore, you'll know that in a case where it could be kavua, you don't accept the raiv. That's yeah. So it's a gzeira. Basically, the point is the only reason to require a double raiv is not because there's more probability by a double raiv that the person is kosher, but rather it's just a gzeira. You don't want anyone to ever confuse to think that you can follow a raiv in a case where the person that was boil or was stationary, because then there's a halach of kavua. And the Gemara continues, V'amar Rab Zeira, so Rab Zeira said, Kol kavua kemechza mechza dami, that any time there's kavua, so we do not follow raiv, and we consider the situation to be like half and half. Just like if it's half and half, it's a suffix, it's an equal suffix, and we can't follow any raiv. Anytime the minority is kavua, is permanent and stationary in their place, the minority is just as strong as the majority, and therefore there's kavua. We'll see soon in the Gemara. The Gemara will bring the source for this concept of kavua. I mean, this concept of kavua, simply speaking, is something that doesn't really make sense logically. I mean, why should you not follow kavua in a case again raiv? Why should you not follow the case of raiv even in a case of kavua? The Gemara is going to bring the psukim, so we'll see. The Gemara asks him, where do we find such a concept that we're concerned about confusing raiv with kavua, and therefore you're going to have a double raiv? But Vatanya, we learned in the Braise here, and this is the Braise, which is the source of the concept of raiv and kavua. So the Braise says, Teisha chanuyas, person comes to a city, and he doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know where it's kosher, which stores are kosher and which are not. And there are 9 stores in the city that kula meiches bastashchut, they all sell meat which is shechter and kosher, and v'achas mecheres basen nevela. But one of the stores sells meat that was not shechter, not kosher. V'lokach machas men, and he went and he bought his meat in one of these stores. But v'eni yedei meizem and lokach, he doesn't know in which store he entered into and he bought his meat. So over here, this is an example for kavua. The suffix begins in the store that he entered into, and he's not sure which store he was in. Those stores are stationary places, permanent places that sell kosher and non-kosher meat. So in such a case, Sveika Yasser, because the source of the Isser, of the suffix rather, is in these stores that are stationary, so this is kavua, and therefore we don't follow the raiv, even though 9 stores are kosher. But if the case was ubenimtza, if he did not enter into any of these stores, the meat was taken out of the stores. So the meat is not in the stationary place where the meat is sold. It was found outside on the street. So then, over here, if you're not sure where it came from, the meat was pairish, it left the stationary place where it comes from. Over here, we're going to determine the status of this meat based on the raiv of the stores in the city, which are 9 selling kosher meat. So what do you see here? You have a situation where there could be raiv and there's kavua, and we're not concerned that you're going to confuse one with another, and you don't require a double raiv here. So, and now the Gemara says, maybe you'll argue and say that when it says there that when you find the meat in the street that you follow raiv, maybe there's also a double raiv. Maybe b'she'ein dalsais medina nu'ulais. It's talking about a city where it doesn't have locked doors, and therefore the Kasi Ruba La Ruba Meyalma. There are also people that are traveling from other places into this city as well. And those people that are traveling are also Raiv Yidden and Raiv that are carrying kosher meat. So maybe there is a double Raiv there as well, and that's the only reason why this meat is going to be kosher. So the Gemara says that's not true, because V'amar Rab Zayda said, Afal Pisha Dalsas Medina Nu'ulais, this halacha of that Mishnah, that you follow Raiv, is even in a case where there are no people that are traveling here from other places. It's locked, and therefore there's only one Raiv of the 9 kosher stores in the city. And still you follow Raiv. So I don't need any double Raiv. I'm not concerned to confuse Raiv with Kavua. Answers the Gemara, Maila asu b'yochsen. You're right, usually we don't require a double Raiv not to confuse Raiv with Kavua, but over here, because we're talking about the question of a girl, whether she would be allowed to marry a Kayin, there's a special stringency that they made regarding the Yichus of Kayinim, not to allow her to get married unless there's a double Raiv, not to confuse Raiv with Kavua. So this is a unique chumrah, special chumrah only b'negeya to kayanim. This is a similar thing the Gemara said before, according to Rabbi Yeshua's opinion. This that Rabbi Yeshua is so stringent in these cases was all because of a special chumrah of kayanim. Now going back to this halacha regarding kavua. So Amar Rab Zayda said, Kol kavua, anytime you have something in its stationary, permanent place, so then even if you have a raiv, you don't follow the raiv, the minority is the same as the majority, it's like half and half. And now Rab Zayda adds to what it said in the Mishnah, Bein l'kola, bein l'chumra. This means I'm going to follow the status of the minority, whether this is going to cause to be a leniency or to be a stringency. Either way, we're not going to follow the majority. So the Gemara asks, from where does Rab Zayda know that this halacha of kavua is used both l'kola and l'chumra? If you'll say it's from the Mishnah or the Braisa that we brought before about the 9 stores, the 9 stores that are selling kosher meat, and one is selling the not kosher meat, and he bought from one of them, and he doesn't know which one he bought it from. So then Sfeika Yasser, because he entered into the store, which is a permanent place, so therefore it'll be asa. And then ubenimtza, but if you found it in the street, halechacha raiv, you follow the raiv. This is the case that we just mentioned, but that's not a source to say that you go l'kula, that you follow kavua, the permanence of this place, even in a case that it's a leniency, hasam l'chumra. Over there, we're using this as a stringency. What are we saying over there? That even though most of the stores are selling kosher meat, and there's only one store that's selling not kosher meat, but kavua will say that I still have to be machmer, and the meat is considered to be non-kosher. So over there it's being stringent, so that's not a source. Ella, rather, there's another source. So here, and this is from a Braisa regarding the halachas of tumah. So before I read it inside, just one point regarding tumah, the halacha regarding suffik by tumah is that if there's a suffik tumah that's found in a Reshus HaYachid, the halacha is that suffik will be tameh. A suffik tumah which is found in a Reshus HaRabim, the halacha of such a suffik is that it's tahir. That's learned out. The Gemara learns it out from a saita. That's always the halacha. So now let's see the case over here. What's the case if you have 9 frogs, and amongst them there's one sheretz? Now the halacha regarding a sheretz is a dead sheretz. So if you touch it, it's going to be metamayu, but it's only certain shrotzim, which are mentioned in the Torah and Parsha Shmini, but not all. A tzafardeya is not part of those shrotzim that will make you tameh. So a person touched something, this little creeping thing that he touched it, and he's not sure what it is that he touched. There are 9 tzfardeim, 9 frogs, and then there's another sheretz that's similar to a frog amongst them. The naga bechad mehem, he touched one of them, v'eni deim beizem naga, and he doesn't know which one of them he touched. Okay, and the case that we're talking about over here is in a Reshus HaYachid. So as I mentioned, what's the halacha in the Reshus HaYachid? If it's a suffix, you would be tameh. So over here, the halacha is sfeikai tameh. We consider this to be an equal suffix, and you'd be tameh, even though it's mostly tzfardeya. So there's no suffix at all. You should follow the Rav and say that you're tired. But nevertheless, because this is in a place which is kavua, this is the place where they permanently are, wherever they live, wherever these. So therefore, because there's a kavua here, so therefore it's considered to be a suffix. And if it's in the Reshus HaYachid, you'll be tameh. So from here, the Gemara again says there's no source to say that we use this concept of kavua even for a leniency. Hasam nami l'chumre. In this case as well, we're being strict and we're saying that you'll be tameh, even though it's 9 tzfardeim with 9 frogs, which is tired. Ella, so the source for what Rab Zera said is from the Seifa of that Braisa. What does it say there? Mitisha Shratzim. What's if the case is in the reverse? And this is actually in the Rishus HaRabim. So you have in the Rishus HaRabim where usually, what is the halacha if there's a suffix? If it's a suffix, you're going to be tahir. So over here the case was that you have 9 shratzim. So its majority is shratzim that should make you tameh. And there should be no suffix about this at all. If it's svardeya echad beinayim, and you have one svardeya amongst them, and now v'noga bechad men, and he touched one of them, v'nideh beizmen noga. So he doesn't know which one he touches. So what does the Braisa say? B'rishus ha'yachid tzveikei tameh. If it was the rishus ha'yachid, he would be tameh. But b'rishus ha'rabim, if it wasn't the rishus ha'rabim, tzveikei toy. This is a suffix, and he would be toy. So why is this considered to be a suffix? If it's 9 shratzim, which are all tameh, and only one svardeya, which is not tameh, why would this even be considered to be a suffix? The answer is because it's in a place of kavua. It's in a place where these shratzim are permanently, and because it's a place which is kavua, so therefore that one svardeya, which is the minority, is equivalent to the other 9 shratzim, and we use this concept of kavua, even in lekula, to say that it's like 50-50, and if it's a suffix in the Rishus HaRabim, you're going to be tired. So this is the source for what Rab Zera said, that we use the concept of kavua even to be lenient. Now the Gemara continues and says, so we have a source from the Mishnayos for this concept of kavua. But where is the source in the Torah for this chiddush? This is a huge chiddush to say that even though you have a majority, and it makes sense logically to follow the majority, but nevertheless, whenever it's kavua, we don't follow the majority. What's the source for this in the pasuk? Amakra, so the pasuk says, "V'arav loy v'kam olav." This is the halacha in the pasuk where it speaks about the reitzeach, a murderer, and the pasuk says, "V'arav loy." Only if you were aiming at this person and you wanted to kill him, so then you're going to be chayiv misa. So there's 2 ways how to interpret this pasuk. One pshat on this pasuk is, which is actually the opinion of Rab Shimon, as Rashi brings from the Gemara in Sanhedrin, that this means achi yiskaven loy. A murderer is only going to be chayiv misa if he killed somebody that he intended to kill. Which means, let's say for example, a person, God forbid, tried to kill Reuven, and instead he kills Shimon. So even though he tried to kill a Yid, but he killed someone else, he's not going to be chayiv misa. That's what the pasuk is saying. V'arav loy v'kam olav. Only if you kill the one that you wanted to. But Rabbanan Amri, now the Rabbanan disagree with this. Rabbanan say that if you tried to kill one Yid and you killed someone else, you're still going to be chayiv misa. So how do they interpret this pasuk here? So Rabbanan say the Bei Rab Yanai, like it was taught by Rab Yanai, prat, that this pasuk is coming to exclude l'zayrik even l'goy. When a person takes a rock and he throws it amongst a crowd of people, and this crowd of people is a mixture of Yidden and Goyim, and it hits a Yid and it kills a Yid. In such a case, because there was a crowd of Yidden and Goyim, so you're going to be potter. When you kill a Goy, you're not chayiv misa. So in such a case, when it was a mixture of Yidden and Goyim, and you threw a rock there, you're going to be potter. That is what the pasuk is saying. Only if you directly aim it at a Yid, not at a crowd of people that has Yidden and Goyim in them. So this is going to be the source for the concept as kavua, as the Gemara now explains. Hey chidami. Now what is the case that this pasuk is speaking about according to this interpretation? Is the case that it's mostly Goyim, even 9 Goyim, and just 1 Yid amongst them. So you don't need this pasuk to say that the Yid would be potter here. The Teipeklei, the Rube Kananiminu. So this Reitzeyach threw a rock into this crowd of people that are mostly Goyim, so you should follow the Raiv. So of course he's going to be potter. You don't need a special pasuk for this. Inami palgo palge. Now even if it was 50-50, half people were Yidden and half were Goyim, he should still be potter. Why? Safik nefashas lahakal. Anytime there's a ritzeach and we have a doubt whether we should be mechayiv and misa or not, we always have to be lenient. As Rashi brings, it says in the pasuk v'tzilo v'shaftu v'tzilo eida. You're supposed to try to save the person and not give him the chiyuv of misa. So here we have a 50-50. We can't give him misa, so we don't need the pasuk for this either. Like tzriches, so the only time we need this pasuk over here to teach me that it would be potter is the iketesha Yisraelim. Even if it's a case that this crowd of people were majority Yidden, even 9 Yidden, the Kanani echad b'neim, there's only one guy amongst them. The havale Kanani kavua, but because these people were in a certain place where they are all permanent, this is their stationary place where they are, so therefore, even though it's only one guy amongst 9 Yidden, and when you threw the rock, statistically speaking, the chances of you hitting that Yid is 9 times against that one guy that's there, but nevertheless, the one guy that's there is kavua, he's permanent, and v'chol kavua kemechza al mechza dami. And therefore we treat this situation according to halacha, that it's like half and half, and therefore the yid's going to be pater from miseh. So this is the source for the concept that we use kol kavua kemechza al mechza dami. And in this case, we even pater the yid from miseh. So it's even in a case that's lenient. Okay, so this concludes this little insertion here where the Gemara went into this gufa, into the subject of kol kavua kemechza al mechza dami. Now we go back to the halacha that we spoke about before regarding the case of the Mishnah when there was this girl that someone was boiler and we don't know who it was. So Rabbi Yechanan said, or rather Rabbi Yechanan ben Nuri said, as long as you have a roiv, then you can say that she's kosher. So now itmer Rav Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav halacha ke Rabbi Yosi. We paskin like Rabbi Yosi that brought in the name of Rabbi Yechanan ben Nuri that if it's a roiv, you're going to be kosher. But Rav Chanan bar Rava Amar Rav, but Rav Chanan bar Rava said in the name of Rav, that Mishnah where they said that this girl is going to be kosher, there was a certain need for that hour, for that time, that they were mat to this, but usually we're not going to be mat to this. So now, as we'll see here in the Gemara, and Rashi explains, at this point, the Gemara is thinking that this halacha that Rav is saying regarding this Mishnah of this girl that had someone was boiler, and we don't know who it is, and Rabbi Yosi says that you have to have a raiv, you only have to have one raiv. As long as you have one raiv, that would be good enough. Before, we learned already before in the Gemara that Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav that you have to have a second raiv. One raiv is not good enough. But at this point, the Gemara is thinking that the argument here, whether you're paskin like this Mishnah or not, is in a case where there's only one raiv. So Mas of Rabbi Yirmiyah asks on this, if there's a question regarding Yuchsin, regarding the yichus, the lineage of who a person is, if he's kosher or not, if she can marry a kayin or not, do we not require two raivs? Over here, what did Rav Chia bar Ashi say in the name of Rav? That we're passing like Rabbi Yosi even with one raiv. But Vatanan, we learned in the Mishnah, this is a Mishnah in Masechta Machshirin. So the Mishnah there says as follows: Matzah batinik mushlach, you find in a city a child that's thrown, abandoned in a city. So we don't know who this child is. If most of the people in this city are goyim, so then we know that the child is a goy. If most of the people in the city are yidden, so then Yisrael, then we know the child is a yid. If it's a city that's half and half, then Yisrael, we also know that the child is a yid. So as Rashi says, the Gemara is soon going to explain why the Mishnah here divides two cases. One case where it's majority yidden, and one case where it's half and half. And what does Rav say in that Mishnah? V'amar Rav. So Rav said, Lo ishanu ela lahachyaisai. This that it says that if it's mostly Yidden, so we say that this child is a Yid. For what? For what do we say that he's a Yid? For this, that we have to give him life. We have to give him his parnasa, as Rashi says, V'chai yechicha imach, that you have to give him his sustenance of what he needs. Only for that sense. Aval yuchsin. But to be able to determine his yichus, to say that he's taka Yid and he can marry into Klal Yisrael and so on, like. For this, we can't rely on the raiv that we have here. So we clearly see that Rav says that even though you have a raiv, you don't rely on one raiv. Now, the Gemara now brings Shmuel had a different interpretation for this. Shmuel said, "Lefakeach olav es hagal." That what it's saying over here is regarding Shabbos. If you have a situation where a house collapsed onto this person, onto this child, and you don't know who this child is, are you allowed to be mechal Shabbos for pekuach nefashos to save this child's life? So when the Mishnah there said that it's considered to be a yid, it was saying regarding this halacha, to be allowed to be mechal Shabbos to save his life. But what's the Gemara's question? Before we said in the name of Rav that we paskin that you follow one raiv, and now we're saying that even though it's a case where you have a raiv, we don't say that the child is a yid to be able to say for his yichus. Answers the Gemara, it's not a question. Ashtemite, Rabbi Yirmiyah that asks this contradiction here in the opinion of Rav, Ashtemite, he didn't see or he forgot or he overlooked. The Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. We already quoted before that Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav that B'krainis shel tzipayri have a ma'isa. That the story of our Mishnah where you follow raiv, there's actually a double raiv. And therefore, over there you have a double raiv, and like we see over here, that Rav says that liyichos, one raiv is not good enough, you have to have two raivs. Now the Gemara asks, Rav Chanan, Barave, the Oma, Hiras, Shah, Hisa. So if so, the question will be, according to Rav Chanan Barave that said that it's a Hiras Shah, that this over there, that in the Mishnah we followed the raiv, it was only a Hiras Shah, it was only for that time, and over there were two raivs. Alright, so there were two raivs, and nevertheless, he's saying that it's a hiras shah, meaning, so according to him, it's mashma, that usually you don't need two raivs. It was only over there that he was machmer, that he required two raivs. So kashya ha. So there's going to be a question over here. Why did he say that it's a hiras shah? Over here we see that Rav says you always require 2 raivs. And says the Gemara, you're right, man de masni ha, loy masni ha. We're going to have to say that the one that said this halach over here, that Rav said before that it's speaking about a double raiv, and the one that said over here that it's a hiras shah, they both are not quoting Rav. They don't agree to each other. If it's 2 raivs, then it's not a hiras shah. Then that's the halacha always. The one that said it, it's a hiras shah, is because he thought that case, or he learned that case is only 1 raiv.
What's mani masni lo masni?
These 2 people were quoting Rav, but both of them quoted Rav, but they didn't hear what the other said. One heard from Rav one fact, and the other heard from Rav another fact. One heard that there has to be 2 raivs, and another one heard from Rav that was a unique exception of hiras shah. If there's 2 raivs, it's not an exception. You always need 2 raivs. The one that said that it's a hiras shah is saying that it was only 1 raiv, and therefore it's an exception. Now the Gemara brings back that Mishnah that we quoted before regarding this abandoned child. Gufa, so what did it say in that Mishnah? Matzabat tinik mushlach, if you found this abandoned child, imre v'evdikachavim, if most of the people of the city are goyim, oivdikachavim. So we know that this child is a guy. Imre v'Yisrael, if most of the people of the city are Yidden, Yisrael. So you know the child is a Yid. Mechtzal mechze, if it's half and half, Yisrael, so then we also know that the Yid is a Yisrael. So Amar Rav, so Rav says about this, when it says that if most are Yidden, that we say the child is a Yid, that's in order to give him parnasa, to give him food. But not for the yichus. Shmuel Amar, and Shmuel said, l'fakeach olav es hagal, that we determined that he's a Yid for this, that we could be machal Shabbos to save his life. Frek the Gemara now on what Shmuel said, Umi Amar Shmuel hachi. Did Shmuel say that only here because most people in the city are Yidden, therefore you can save his life? But for Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yudam, Shmuel, ein hoichem bebikuach nefesh acha harayv. When it comes to a situation that a Yid's life might be in danger, you don't have to have a raiv to know that it's a raiv Yidden to be allowed to be machal Shabbos to save his life. Even in a case where it's not raiv and it might be a Yid, you still have to be machal Shabbos to save his life. Ella, well, we don't know. But even if it's not Raiv Yidden, we still, because there's a small chance that it might be a Yid, you still have to be Machal Shabbos to save his life. Says the Gemara, Ella ki itmer, the Shmuel areish itmer. What Shmuel said was actually going on the first part of the Mishnah. Even in a case where it's mostly Gayim. Oivid kechavim, so we say that this child now is a guy. But Amar Shmuel, and this Shmuel said, Ulefakech olav esagal. However, when it comes to saving his life, if it's a collapse on Shabbos, einekei. We don't say he's a guy, since he might be from the minority where it's Yidden, you have to save his life. Now, what else did it say in the Mishnah there? If it's mostly Gayim, so we say he's considered to be a guy. So Lamai Hilchasa, regarding what do we say that he is considered to be a guy? He said you're allowed to save his life on Shabbos, so regarding what do we consider him to be a guy? Rav Papa says, La achiloi nevelos. We consider him to be a guy regarding this, that we're allowed to give him to eat non-kosher food. In other words, not only are we allowed to let him eat non-kosher food, we're even allowed to give him to eat non-kosher food. Okay, so regarding this, he's considered to be a guy. Rashi says, for sure, regarding money matters, there's different halachas regarding money matters, where goyim are treated differently regarding a lost object, and regarding nizaken, as we'll see soon in the Gemara, for sure we treat him to be a guy. Now the Mishnah said, Yisrael, if majority are Yidden, it's a Yid. L'mayel chesed, regarding what is this said? Rav Papa says, Lahachser lo yavede. This is being said regarding this, that we have to return him a lost object. And this is a chiddush here. And I'm needless to say, in other words, that we would not allow him to eat non-kosher food. He has to fulfill all mitzvahs. But even regarding money matters as well, we treat him as a Yid, and we have to return to him a lost object. And we follow the Raiv here. Now it said in the Mishnah, the last case, mechtzal mechze, if it's half and half Yisrael, so then he's considered to be a Yid. Lamai hilchase, regarding what is this said? For sure, it's not the same. It's not being said regarding the fact that you have to return to him a lost object, because since it's half and half, we don't know if he's a Yid or a guy. You don't have to return to him a lost object. And if it would be that, so it would be the same like the previous case. So regarding what are we saying, that if it's half and half, that we consider him to be a Yid? Reish Lakish says, Li nizakin. This is regarding the halacha of nizakin, and this is regarding a shiur, an ox that gores another ox. So what's the halacha? So over here, Rashi brings, the halacha is that an ox of a Yid that gores an ox of a guy, so the Yid is totally pater. What's if it's the reverse? If an ox of a guy gores the ox of a Yid, so then he's going to be totally chayiv. to pay 100%. What's if a shiur of one yid gores the shiur of another yid? So there we know there's the difference between chatzi nezek and nezek shalem by a tam. If it's the first 2 times, the first 3 times you pay half, and then afterwards you pay nezek shalem. Okay, so now the Gemara will explain what did Reish Lakish mean when he said that for Nizakin is considered to be a Yid. Hey Chidami, what are we speaking about here? If the case is the Nakche Turidi Don Le Turidi Day, that there's an ox of a Yid that gored the ox of this individual, of this child, that comes from a city that was half Yidden and half Goyim, and we don't know who he is. So why should the Yid have to pay him like a Yid? Lei Malay, the Yid could tell this person, I said I the Yisraelat, you have to prove the fact that you're a Yid and v'shakal, and then I'll pay you. You came from a city that was half Yid and half Goyim. We have no idea who you are. So you have to prove it. So the case over here is the nakha turidi day la turidi done. It's his ox that gored the ox of a Yid. So now what happens is palge mishalim. Half he definitely has to pay. Whether he's a Yid, whether he's a guy. So half he has to pay. But now v'idach palge, now the other half, if he was a Yid, he would be pater. If he's a guy, he'd be chayiv, because a guy has to pay fully even the first time. So amaluhu, so now he could come and turn to us and say, I sirai de lav Yisrael no. You prove the fact that I'm not a Yid, and that and I'll give you. So over here the point is the money is in his pocket, and we're trying to be mitzi mama from his pocket. So over here he's going to say, prove the fact that I'm not a Yid, and I'll pay you fully like a guy. And there, Gabi this, we treat him like a Yid. And that's the halach of Mechza Yisrael. Hadran halach besula nisse. This is the conclusion of the first perek of Masechta Kesubos.